Captain Du Yun stood at the front window of his ship, the HSS Persistence. His dark eyes studied the stars ahead, while his fingers lightly tapped the metal railing. The ship was small, only about as long as 2 football fields put together. Most other captains called it the paper boat because they thought it was too weak to fight real battles. The bridge of the ship was quiet except for the soft beeping of computers and the low hum of the engines. Du Yun's crew worked at their stations, each person focused on their own tasks. They had been together for 5 years now, protecting the outer colonies that were far from Earth. While other ships got exciting missions and big battles, the Persistence just did regular patrols. Captain called GI from her weapons station. She was the ship's tactical officer, in charge of all the guns and defenses. I'm picking up some strange energy readings from the Omega sector. Her fingers moved quickly across her screen as she tried to get a better look at whatever she had found. Du Yun walked over to her station. "Show me," he said simply. GA's screen displayed several moving dots, each one representing a ship that shouldn't have been there. The dots were moving in a pattern that worried both of them. "Those aren't regular trader ships," GA said, pointing to how the dots moved together. "They're too organized, too military." Chief Engineer Taiho joined them at the tactical station. He was wearing his usual work uniform, which had some grease stains from fixing the engines. "Our old sensors might be acting up again," he said, but his voice didn't sound very convinced. "Want me to check them?" "No," Du Yun said, shaking his head. "The sensors are working fine. What we're seeing is real." He straightened up and looked at his crew. "He-Jin, try to pick up any messages from those ships." The young communications officer nodded and adjusted her headset. He-Jin was the newest member of their crew, but she was very good at her job. Her fingers danced across her console as she searched for any signals. After a few minutes, He-Jin's eyes went wide. "Captain, I'm getting fragments of transmissions. They're encrypted, but..." She paused, listening carefully. "They're not using any encryption method I've seen before. This isn't from any human ship." The bridge grew even quieter as everyone understood what that meant. Unknown ships using unknown codes could only mean one thing: aliens. And aliens moving in military formation meant trouble. Du Yun returned to the front window, thinking hard. They had heard rumors about a dangerous alien group called the Meridian Collective, but no one had ever seen them this close to human space. He made his decision quickly. "Send a message to Fleet Command," he ordered. "Tell them everything we've seen. Include all our sensor data." He-Jin sent the message right away. The response came back faster than anyone expected, and it wasn't good news. They don't believe us, Captain," He-Jin said, sounding frustrated. "They say our old sensors must be malfunctioning. They're telling us to return to our regular patrol route." Du Yun wasn't surprised. The Persistence was an old ship, and Fleet Command often ignored their reports. But this time was different. This time, they had found something real and dangerous. "Show me the sensor data again," he said to GI. She brought up the readings, and Du Yun studied them carefully. There was something odd about the energy signatures from the alien ships, something that their old sensors had picked up, but newer ships might miss. "Taiho," he called to his engineer. "What do you make of these energy patterns?" Taiho looked at the data, and his eyes lit up with understanding. "These ships are using some kind of advanced shielding technology," he explained. "But our old quantum sensors work on different frequencies than modern ones. We're seeing things that newer ships would miss completely. Like watching an old TV channel that nobody uses anymore," Jai added, getting excited. "We can see them, but they don't think anyone's looking." Du Yun nodded slowly. This was exactly why he trusted his crew so much. They might not have the newest ship or the best equipment, but they knew how to use what they had. Years of working on the frontier had taught them to notice things that others missed. The captain walked around the bridge, looking at each member of his crew. They all knew what he was thinking. Fleet Command had ordered them to ignore the alien ships, But if they were right, one of Earth's oldest colonies might be in danger. If those are Meridian ships, Du Yun said carefully, they're probably heading for New Hope Colony. It's the closest human settlement to their current course. New Hope was home to over 1 million people, and it didn't have many defenses. Most people thought it was too far from alien space to need heavy protection. "What are your orders, Captain?" J.A. asked, though she already knew what he would say. In 5 years serving together, the crew had learned to trust their captain's judgment. Do Yoon stood straighter, his decision made. "Plot a course to follow those ships," he ordered. "But keep our distance. We need to learn everything we can about them." He paused, looking at each crew member. "What we're about to do goes against direct orders. Anyone who wants to object should speak now." The bridge was silent. Nobody moved. They all knew the risk they were taking, but they also knew it was the right thing to do. "Very well," Du Yoon said with a small smile. "Hejin, keep monitoring their communications. Jia, I want to know everything about their weapons and defenses. Taiho, see what else our old sensors can tell us about their ships." The crew got to work right away. The Persistence might have been small, and most of the fleet might have looked down on it, but right now it was the only ship that could see a terrible danger coming, and its crew was determined to do something about it. As the ship changed course to follow the alien fleet, Du Yoon returned to the front window. The stars stretched out before them, beautiful and dangerous. He didn't know exactly what they would find, but he knew his crew would face it together. "Like my grandfather used to say," he said quietly to himself, "the smallest ant can still warn the colony about danger." The Persistence might have been the smallest ship in the fleet, but sometimes being small had its advantages. And soon, everyone would learn just how dangerous a small ship could be. 3 days had passed since the Persistence began following the alien fleet. The small ship stayed far behind, just close enough for their old sensors to keep watching. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Taiho hadn't slept much. He sat surrounded by screens showing strange energy patterns from the alien ships. "There's something odd about these readings," Taiho said to himself, rubbing his tired eyes. He had been staring at the same data for hours, trying to understand what made these alien ships different. The patterns on his screen looked like waves, rising and falling in a steady beat. Suddenly, he sat up straight. "That's it," he shouted, startling a young engineer who was walking past. Taiho grabbed his tablet and ran to the bridge, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Captain Du Yoon was at his usual spot near the front window when Taiho burst onto the bridge. "Captain," Taiho called out, trying to catch his breath, "I found something important." The captain turned around, and the rest of the bridge crew looked up from their stations. They had all been working nonstop, gathering every bit of information they could about the alien fleet. Taiho connected his tablet to the main screen. "Look at these energy patterns," he said, pointing to the moving lines. "Our old quantum sensors show something that newer ships would miss completely." The Meridian ship shields pulse at regular intervals, like a heartbeat. Jia moved closer to the screen, her eyes narrowing as she studied the pattern. "Every 30 seconds, she said, counting the peaks in the energy waves. "Their shields get slightly weaker at each pulse." "Exactly," Taiho said excitedly. "Newer sensors are too fast. They take readings so quickly that they miss this pattern. But our old sensors are slower. They show us the big picture, like taking a step back to see a whole painting instead of just looking at the tiny brush strokes." Do Yoon walked over to the main screen. "How much weaker do the shields get during these pulses?" he asked. "About 15%, Taiho answered. "It's not much, but it's something we might be able to use." At her communication station, Hejin suddenly sat up straighter. "Captain," she called out, "I think I found something too." Her fingers moved quickly across her console as she worked to clean up the signal. "I've been recording all their transmissions, even though they're encrypted. When I slow them down and filter out the noise, there's a pattern." The young officer put the signal on the main speakers, At first, it sounded like random static, but then everyone heard it. A repeated series of clicks and humming sounds. It's their coordination signals, He-Jin explained. They use these to keep their ships flying in formation. And look what happens when we compare it to Taiho's shield readings. She lined up her data with the engineer's display. Jia gasped softly. The signals match the shield pulses, she said. They have to lower their shields slightly every time they coordinate their movements. Du Yun looked at his crew with pride. Other ships might have better equipment, but his crew knew how to think differently, how to see things others missed. Jia, he said, turning to his tactical officer, can you use this information? Jia was already working at her station, running calculations. Yes, she said after a few minutes. If we know exactly when their shields will pulse, and if we time our shots perfectly. She looked up at her captain. We might have a chance to hurt them, even with our smaller weapons. But we'll only get one try, Taiho added. As soon as we attack, they'll know we can see their weakness. They'll change their patterns. He-Jin spoke up from her station. Sir, I've decoded more of their transmissions. Based on their current course and speed, they'll reach New Hope Colony in less than 2 days. The bridge grew quiet as everyone thought about what that meant. New Hope Colony had no major defenses, no large military ships to protect it. The colony's only hope was the small ship that everyone had dismissed as obsolete. Du Yun walked slowly around the bridge, looking at each member of his crew. They were tired from days of constant work, but their eyes were bright with determination. We need a plan, he said, one that uses everything we've learned. For the next several hours, the crew worked together to create their strategy. GA calculated exact firing solutions, timing them to the shield pulses. Taiho found ways to modify their torpedoes to do more damage during those brief moments of weakness. He-Jin mapped out the alien fleet's communication patterns, looking for ways to predict their movements. It's like a dance, Jia said as she explained her targeting plan. We need to time everything perfectly. One step out of place, and we fail. And we'll only get one chance to dance, Taiho added, but he was smiling. He believed in their plan. As the crew worked, Du Yun sent a final message to Fleet Command, explaining what they had found and what they planned to do. He didn't expect an answer, and he didn't get one. The persistence was on its own. All our lives, Du Yun said to his crew as they finished their preparations, people have underestimated this ship. They called it too old, too small, too weak. He touched the wall of his bridge gently. But sometimes the oldest tools are the best ones for the job. Sometimes being small means you see things the big ships miss. The crew nodded, understanding. They had spent years learning every quirk and capability of their old ship. Now those years of experience might save 1,000,000 lives. Get some rest, Du Yun ordered his crew. Tomorrow, we'll show everyone why you should never ignore the small ships. As his crew left to get some sleep, he stayed on the bridge, watching the distant stars. The Persistence might have been just a paper boat to the rest of the fleet, but paper, when folded right, could become surprisingly strong. Tomorrow, they would prove that to everyone. In his mind, Du Yun could already see how the battle would play out. They would need perfect timing, steady nerves, and a little bit of luck. But most of all, they would need to trust in themselves and their old, reliable ship. Size isn't everything, he whispered to himself, remembering an old saying his mother used to tell him. It's how you use what you have that matters. Tomorrow, they would use everything they had, everything they knew, to save a colony that didn't even know it was in danger. The Persistence continued its quiet pursuit of the alien fleet, its old engines humming steadily. Inside, its crew rested and prepared for the fight of their lives. They were the only ones who could see the danger coming, the only ones who knew how to stop it. Tomorrow, they would prove that even the smallest ship could change the course of history. The day of battle arrived with no fanfare, just the quiet beeping of ship computers and the steady hum of engines. Captain Du Yun stood on his bridge, watching as the massive Meridian fleet came into view. 50 warships, each one bigger than the Persistence, moved together like a school of metal fish. "All stations, report," Du Yun said calmly, though his heart was beating faster than usual. "Engineering ready," Tai-Ho answered from his station. "Modify torpedoes are loaded and synchronized with shield pulse timing." "Tactical ready," Jia reported, her fingers hovering over her controls. "All firing solutions are programmed and double-checked." "Communications ready," He Jin added. "I'm tracking their coordination signals. They haven't changed their pattern." Du Yun nodded, taking a deep breath. "Remember," he said to his crew, "we only get one chance at this. Make it count." The Persistence stayed at the edge of the alien fleet's sensor range. To the Meridians, the small human ship probably looked like a lost patrol vessel, too scared to come closer. They were wrong. "They're starting their attack formation," the Jin reported, listening to the alien signals. "Just like we predicted. The colony is still 3 hours away." "Perfect," Du Yun said. "That gives us exactly one chance to stop them." He touched the ship's controls gently. "Begin Operation Paper Cut." The Persistence started moving, but not toward the alien fleet. Instead, it moved away, as if running from the mighty Armada. This was part of their plan. The aliens needed to think the small human ship was afraid. "They're not paying much attention to us," He Jin said, monitoring the alien communications. "They think we're retreating." "Good," Du Yun replied. Tai-Ho, how long until the next major shield pulse?" 4 minutes, the engineer answered. "All torpedoes are ready. We modify them just like we planned. They're tuned exactly to the frequency of their shield pulses." Jia spoke up from her tactical station. "I've mapped their formation. The command ship is in the center, protected by the others. But during their shield pulse, we'll have a clear shot through their defense line." The bridge crew worked silently as they counted down the minutes. Everything had to be perfect. One mistake, and their plan would fail. The colony would be destroyed, and no one would even know they had tried to save it. 2 minutes, Tai-Ho announced. Du Yun gave his final orders. "He Jin, record everything. If we fail, Fleet Command needs to know what we learned about their weaknesses." 1 minute, Tai-Ho said. "Incoming signal." He Jin suddenly called out. "The Meridian fleet is hailing us." "Ignore it," Du Yun ordered. "They're just trying to scare us away. Stay focused." 30 seconds, Tai-Ho counted down. Jia's hands moved across her controls, making final adjustments. "Targeting solutions locked. All weapons ready." 20 seconds. The Persistence turned around, facing the alien fleet. From far away, it must have looked silly, one tiny ship facing 50 massive warships. But size wasn't everything. 10 seconds. "All hands," Du Yun announced to his ship. "Brace for combat maneuvers." 5 seconds. The whole bridge crew held their breath. Shield pulse beginning. Now, Du Yun gave the order. "Fire everything." The Persistence released its full arsenal of modified torpedoes. Each one had been carefully timed and tuned by Tai-Ho. They streaked across space, glowing blue against the black background of stars. The alien fleet didn't react at first. They probably thought the small ship's weapons couldn't hurt them. They were wrong. The torpedoes hit at exactly the right moment, when the alien shields were at their weakest. Instead of bouncing off, they passed right through, their energy matching the exact frequency of the shield pulses. "Direct hits," GA shouted. Multiple impacts on their command ship. The massive alien vessel erupted in a series of explosions. But that was just the beginning. The command ship's destruction created a chain reaction, just as Tai-Ho had predicted. "Their shield synchronization is failing," He Jin reported excitedly. "The whole fleet is losing coordination. Without their command ship, the alien vessels couldn't maintain their complex shield patterns. One by one, their defenses began to fail. Some ships crashed into each other, while others tried to retreat in panic. "It's working better than we expected," Taiho said, watching his screens in amazement. "The energy release from their failed shields is causing cascade failures throughout their fleet." Do-yoon watched as the mighty Meridian fleet fell into chaos. The aliens had never expected a serious attack from such a small ship. They hadn't bothered to protect themselves against old, outdated sensors and weapons. That mistake was costing them everything. "Hajin," Do-yoon ordered, "send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them the Meridian fleet is in disarray. We need ships to help us round up any survivors." "They're responding," Hajin said with surprise. "Multiple ships are already on their way. They say they picked up the battle on long-range sensors." The bridge crew cheered as more explosions lit up space. The alien fleet that had threatened to destroy an entire colony was now breaking apart, defeated by the smallest ship in the human fleet. "Should we pursue the surviving ships?" Ga asked, her weapons still ready. Do-yoon shook his head. "No need. Our job was to protect the colony, and we've done that." He smiled at his crew. "Besides, I think we've made our point." The Persistence stayed in position, watching as the remaining alien ships fled in different directions. Soon, the space around them was filled with the wreckage of what had been a mighty invasion fleet. "Damage report?" Do-yoon asked. "Minor scratches to our paint," Taiho reported with a grin. They never even got a chance to shoot back. Hajin was busy at her station, handling incoming messages. "Sir, you won't believe this. We're getting communications from everywhere. Fleet Command, other ships, even the colony. They all want to know how we did it." "Tell them we'll explain everything," Do-yoon said. "But first, let's make sure the colony is safe." As the adrenaline of battle faded, the crew of the Persistence looked at each other with pride. They had just proved that being underestimated could be an advantage. Their old ship, their outdated sensors, and their years of experience had accomplished what newer, bigger ships couldn't have done. "My grandmother used to say," Do-yoon told his crew, "that wisdom comes with age, not size." He looked around his bridge at the old controls and worn seats. Today we proved her right. The Persistence might have been small, and it might have been old, but now it had a new title: the ship that destroyed an Armada. Not bad for a paper boat. 3 months after the battle that saved New Hope Colony, the HFY Persistence sat in the main repair dock of Earth's largest space station. Workers crawled over its hull, but they weren't fixing damage. Instead, they were studying every inch of the small ship that had changed the way humans thought about space warfare. Captain Do-yoon stood in a large meeting room, facing the leaders of Fleet Command. The same people who had ignored his warnings now wanted to know everything about how his crew had defeated the Meridian fleet. "The key was our old sensors," Do-yoon explained, pointing to the display screen behind him. "Sometimes the oldest tools show us things that new ones miss." He smiled as he remembered how many times people had told him to upgrade his ship's equipment. In the front row, Taiho was giving his own presentation to a group of engineering experts. He had drawn diagrams showing how their old quantum sensors had detected the patterns in alien shield frequencies. "It's like listening to a song," he told them. "Our old sensors were slow enough to hear the whole melody, while newer ones only heard single notes." At another station, Ga worked with fleet tactical officers, showing them her targeting solutions. Her ideas about timing attacks to match enemy shield pulses had become required reading at the Fleet Academy. Young officers now studied the battle tactics of the Persistence, learning that sometimes the smallest ship could find the biggest weakness. Hajin had her own audience. Intelligence officers listened carefully as she explained how she had decoded the Meridian coordination signals. Her methods for analyzing alien communications were already being used by ships across human space. But the biggest change was in how people looked at older ships and equipment. Fleet Command had started a new program called the Persistence Protocol. Instead of throwing away old technology, they now looked for ways it might see things differently than newer equipment. Your victory wasn't just about destroying an enemy fleet. Admiral Kang told Du Yun after the presentations. You showed us that sometimes our old tools are still valuable. Sometimes they see things in ways our new ones can't. The Admiral handed Du Yun a data tablet. These are your new orders, she said. The Persistence will become a training ship. You and your crew will teach others how to think differently about space combat. How to use everything they have, not just the newest technology. Do Yoon looked at the orders, then at his crew. They had all heard stories about legendary ships, vessels that changed the course of history. Now their small patrol ship, the one everyone had called a paper boat, had become one of those legends. Later that evening, Do Yoon's crew gathered in their favorite spot on the space station, a small cafe with a view of their ship. The Persistence looked different now. Workers had cleaned and repainted its hull, but they hadn't changed its old sensors or outdated equipment. Those weren't flaws anymore. They were advantages. I got another job offer today, Taiho said, sipping his coffee. Some big research company wants me to help them develop new sensor systems based on our old ones. He shook his head. I told them no. I'd rather stay and teach others what we learned. J.A. nodded. Same here. 5 different fleet ships asked me to be their tactical officer. She looked out at the Persistence, but none of them would feel right. This is home. Did you see the new recruits today? He Jin asked, smiling. They all wanted to know if they could serve on our ship. They called us legends. She still seems surprised by all the attention. Do Yoon listened to his crew talk, feeling proud of how they had handled their sudden fame. Success hadn't changed them. They were still the same dedicated team that had spent years doing their jobs quietly and well. Through the window, they could see other ships coming and going from the space station. But now, when those ships passed the Persistence, they didn't ignore it anymore. Instead, they gave it respect. Some even changed course to avoid coming too close, as if the small ship might still have some surprises left. Tomorrow, we start training our first class of students, Du Yoon reminded his crew. Remember how it felt when everyone looked down on our ship. We need to teach them that every tool has value. Every technique might be useful. Every crew member might see something others miss. The crew stayed late into the night, sharing stories and planning for their new role as teachers. They had gone from being the overlooked patrol ship to becoming instructors for the whole fleet. It was a big change, but they were ready for it. As they finally headed back to their quarters, Du Yoon took one last look at his ship. The Persistence had lived up to its name. It had persisted when others doubted it, survived when others thought it couldn't, and succeeded when others said it would fail. My father once told me, Du Yoon said to his crew, that true strength isn't about being the biggest or newest. It's about using what you have in the best way possible. He smiled at his team. We proved him right. The lights of the space station reflected off the Persistence's hull, making it shine like a star. It wasn't the biggest ship in the fleet, or the newest, or the most powerful. But it had something better. A crew that knew how to use everything they had, who understood that sometimes the oldest methods could solve the newest problems. From that day on, when new recruits joined the fleet, their instructors would tell them the story of the Persistence. They would learn about the small ship that no one feared until the day it destroyed an Armada. They would understand that victory doesn't always go to the biggest or strongest, but to those who learn to use their strengths wisely. The legend of the paper boat that sank an Armada would be told for generations. And somewhere in space, the Persistence and its crew would continue their work, teaching others that the most powerful weapon isn't technology or size. It's knowing how to use what you have.